All right. The question today is, will having a couple of failed Kickstarters in a row do irreparable damage to your brand? And if not, how do you course correct after having a couple of what feel like really big failures back to back? How do you course correct? How do you get back on a roll on Kickstarter? That's what I want to talk about on today's video. My name is Tyler James. I am the host of the Comics Launch podcast. I'm also the founder of Comics Launch Pro, which is a training community for comic creators who are interested in building audiences and launching awesome projects to them on the Kickstarter platform. I am a publisher myself. I've used Kickstarter to help build the business Comics Tribe, which is a publisher of comics, graphic novels, and children's books. And I am just wanted to, anyone checking us out for the first time, I want to make sure that you know about a resource that we put together. If you are interested in launching awesome Kickstarter projects, you can go over to comicslaunch.com/roadmap, download what is basically a simple roadmap for your first or next successful launch. Want to make sure that you have access to that guide. All right, so the topic of this video really came up because I saw a friend of mine, someone I've known in the world of comic creating for many, many years, and I've been, met at conventions and just, talked to off and on, a hard worker. He's been in this game for a long time, ton of experience, talented creator. But he asked the question, he said, with my last two Kickstarters having failed, I feel as if I've damaged my brand irreparably. Any tips on how to course correct? And he sort of put that out there, and really wanted to get the feedback from many of the creators that are in his world and have been that he knows. And so I left him a quick message over there because I was a little bit late to the party, and there was so much great feedback and advice and tips and suggestions from other creators that a lot of them had some of it covered. But what I responded to him was pretty simply. I said, know that the only person on the planet who is making the connection between a couple of launches that you did that didn't hit their funding goals as evidence that your brand has been irreparably damaged is you. Okay. And the reason I wanted to share that is because this is something that I see happen a lot. I see it happen in my own life. I see it happen with other creators. And it's the power of the stories that we tell ourselves. The truth is, the stories we tell ourselves create our own reality far more than our reality impacts the stories that we tell ourselves. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean, you've got two people that they can have the exact same thing happen to them, but can come out of that event with a different story about what that event meant. And the story that they're telling themselves is going to impact what happens next, the reality that they go and then experience next, far more than what that original thing was. It's the story that you tell yourself and the actions that you take going forward as a result of that story that are really the important thing. And that's the important thing to address. And so while a lot of the feedback that this creator received from other creators were great, really tactical things that they could go and do, things to change, things to twitch, things to try, go do this, not that. Like, that's all good. That's all great. The real challenge, though, and the real opportunity, though, is to get control of the story that you have in yourself about what just happened. It's this battle with the man or woman in the mirror that is the real battle against these things. And so the more I've worked with creators on their launches and their projects, the funny thing is like the to-dos, the step-by-steps, the stuff, like that stuff's the easy part. Like that stuff, yes, you need to know it and you need to have it and you check all those boxes. But the difficult part, and the part that I end up spending the most of my time on, especially when I'm working closely with creators, is the battle in here. The story in here. And so for this creator, and I want to give you a little bit of context without, revealing the creator's name and going into it, but this is a creator, just so you have a little context. it's a creator that's had success on Kickstarter. He actually had 2 successful Kickstarter campaigns that both raised over $10,000, which that's like a top 25% or so projects. He's had a couple of top 25% projects on the Kickstarter platform. And his last one of those was actually back in 2016. Now, this creator, though, for his last 2 launches, one which launched last month, and it only raised about 40% of its goal, and the one before that raised about 30% of its goal. Both of those goals were set, relatively highly above the average goal for the kind of project that he was launching. But both of them failed to hit the funding. But this is not a creator that's never had success on Kickstarter. So I just wanted to set that context. But one of the things that I want to do is just start, when you have a story in your head. And in this video, really, the 2 main things that I want to focus on is, first, I want to look at that actual question and break it down. Does having 2 failed Kickstarters in a row damage your brand irreparably? So we'll look at that first. And then we're going to look at that question of, okay, what are the tips to course correct, assuming that his brand is not irreparably damaged and that as a result, he needs to quit and never do this again. Okay. So the first question, does having 2 failed Kickstarters in a row damage your brand irreparably? If this creator and I were sitting down over a cup of coffee, or in a coaching session, or just chatting, I would start by asking him some questions. The first thing I'd ask him was, all right, what are the facts? Like, let's not talk about feelings yet. Like, what are the facts? Like, what actually happened? And he would probably tell me, well, in 2019, I launched this project, and it was sort of a new genre for me, and I launched it. And whereas my past Kickstarters had, hundreds of backers, this one had less than 100 backers, and it didn't raise the goal that I'd set. It only came 30%. And I said, okay, well, I guess that project didn't have a following. And so I launched another project, and this was a project that I've actually, was supposed to come out in 2015, and all this stuff with another publisher, but I launched it on Kickstarter, and that only hit 40% of his goal. And we could go into all of the facts on the details there. But it's important to get those facts laid out on the table, regardless of just the emotion of it. Just focus on the facts, like what actually happened, not the story about the facts. After that, it's like, okay, well, what's the story that you're telling yourself? And the story that he's telling himself right now is, man, my last 2 Kickstarters have failed, and it feels like my brand is damaged irreparably. It feels like I have no more support. I've squandered my support with my audience. That Kickstarter is no longer a viable option for me. That I don't have it. I suck at marketing. It seems like everyone else is having awesome launches, but it's not in the cards for me. These are a lot of things that I'm sure this creator might be telling himself. And then I probed a little bit further, like, how does that story make you feel? And I'm sure he'd be like, what do you think? How do you think it makes me feel? It makes me feel awful. Like, it makes me feel like this is all futile, that I've wasted my time, my money, I'm a failure, like all this stuff. All right. Once we go through those 3 questions, though, the next question is, all right, so what, as a result of feeling that about what happened and the story you're telling yourself, what actions does that make you want to take going forward? Like, what do you want to do because as a result of that story and of those feelings? And I'm guessing, if that's the story that I have, that my brand is irreparably damaged, that I want to give up. I want to do something else. I want to never make another comic again. I want to never launch another thing again. I want to go and curl up in a ball and hide. Or I want to just, throw in the towel. And that is the challenge and the problem with these negative, harsh stories that we tell ourselves, because the actions and the thoughts that result from those feelings in that story, in almost all cases, are not going to be positive. Because a question that I then will usually ask is, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want your reality to be? What do you want the answer to be? And in this case, the answer is probably, well, I want my book to be made. I want to keep creating. I've got more stories to tell. In fact, I want to launch more projects. I want to work with more artists. I want to, shine a light on more of the issues that I care about in my work. I want to reach more readers, right? And so the thing that we always have to reconcile is the current story and the thoughts in my head and the actions that those thoughts and that story what will lead to, is that congruous with what you actually want? Because if it's not, then you got to get that story out of your head. You got to get those thoughts and those feelings under control and exercised from you. Otherwise, it's going to be like driving with the emergency brake on and no gas in the tank. You won't. It'll be impossible to get what you want with a broken story in your head. And so a question that is always great is, well, what might be possible for you if that story is false? All right. What would be possible if, and sometimes it's helpful to be like, all right, well, what's the exact opposite of the story? The exact opposite of the story in this case is, having 2 failed Kickstarters in a row has done nothing to damage my brand. In fact, it has no impact on my future success. Right? That's the opposite. Well, like, what would be possible if that was true? Well, what might be possible for this creator is that he could launch another project and it could be successful. What might be possible for this creator is that it was just a bump in the road and everything that he wants to create will still come. It was just a minor setback. This is a creator I know who's had a ton of resilience and had, anyone that's been in comics for as long as he has had obstacles and bumps in the road and highs and lows and everything. And so I know that this creator has a ton of resilience and he can look back to, things that were at one point in his life felt like the worst and the worst and ended up being blessings in disguise. I know that this creator could find those stories in his experience. And if he can find those now, it's going to lead to a lot better stuff. But the problem or the challenge a lot of times with believing the opposite version of the story is, well, do I have any evidence of that? And do you have any evidence that there are creators that have had 2 failed Kickstarters in a row only to not see that their brand was irreparably damaged and go on to actually have a lot of success? Now, this creator might actually not have any examples or have any evidence of that because he hasn't gone and looked for them. What I can say is that I have evidence of that. Because I've worked with 300 creators right now on their launches. And, there's one creator in my community, her first 2 launches failed to fund. First 2 launches failed to fund. And they were both for the same series and they failed to fund. She went back to work, went back and followed a different recipe for success on the next time, launched, and her next project, her 3rd attempt, was successful. And fast forward a couple of years, and she just posted in our community this awesome picture of all 3 volumes of her series, her webcomic series, in a beautiful trade collection that have all been funded on Kickstarter since then. I think she's had 4 or 5 successful launches after having 2 failed launches in a row. So, is it a rule that having 2 failed Kickstarters in a row will damage your brand irreparably? Is that a rule? Is that a truth? Is that a fact? Well, if that is a fact, if that is a truth, if that is a universal law, then it has to be true in all cases. I've just given you one case where that was absolutely categorically not true. So, is that truth? Is that a fact? No, I've just, if you want to use your mathematical, logical proofs, if we were in math class and doing proofs, I have just proved with that one piece of evidence that the idea that 2 failed Kickstarters in a row will damage your brand irreparably is not true. And so there is evidence of that. And so another question, though, is like, what's your desired version of the story? Like, what do you want the story to be? If the story in your head is 2 failed Kickstarters have damaged my brand irreparably, like, what do you wish that the story was? Well, I wish that, maybe you might say, well, you know what? My last 2 Kickstarters missed the mark, but that does not mean that I am not a valuable, talented, worthy creator working with an awesome creative team that with stories to tell that cannot have success in the future, right? That might be the desired story, right? And we could find more evidence of that other people have had failures in the past and gone on to have wild successes. All right. And so if the original story that you're telling yourself is not going to give you what you want, it's up to you to change the story and to choose a different story. And so that's what I want to encourage this creator to do so that he can move forward with other things. Now, before we just move on to the next part, because I think it's pretty clear that having a couple of failed Kickstarters is not going to do irreparable damage to your brand, I want to put this in relief. Is it possible that anything that someone does could irrevocably damage their brand? Yes, I would say yes, that is possible. And so what I want you to think about, and if anyone that's watching this has an examples of brands that have been irrevocably damaged, who comes to mind? I just did a quick thinking about that off the cuff. One brand that's irreparably damaged would be the Bill Cosby brand, right? Bill Cosby at one point, America's dad, as respected and beloved a figure of Americana as you possibly can. Fast forward to 2021, irrevocably damaged brand. There's no question about it. What did he do to irrevocably damage his brand? Well, we won't get into that now, but what did he do? Think about how awful the things that he did to damage that brand. All right. Another example of a brand that may have been irrevocably damaged, maybe just recently, Robinhood. So the trading software that was used largely by retail and smaller investors. A big portion of them were involved in the whole Reddit, GameStop trading thing. Like Robinhood froze the ability for their users to trade, resulting in many of them losing out on money. Losing out big and being only able to sell and not buy. And it felt like a complete and total betrayal of their user base. That brand may be irrevocably damaged, given, that may be a company that will never recover from that and will have to, change what they're doing. That was a big thing. Now, you may have some other So here's another example. There's a few artists that worked for Magic the Gathering that were fired for using their positions of power to take advantage of women. Yeah, I mean, and we've seen plenty of examples. The Me Too movement, all like those are some things that could potentially irrevocably damage a brand. All right. Now, these are some examples so that it would be false for me to, as much as America and the world loves a good comeback story, there are some things that you could do to irrevocably damage your brand. We just listed a few examples, cheating your customers, drugging and abusing women, using your positions of power in abusive ways. Now look at what you did. You launched a couple of Kickstarters for projects that you were passionate about that didn't hit their goal. but they still got some support, and each of them got over thousands of funding. Is doing that, is the crime of doing that, and I say crime in quotes, anywhere close to the actions that actually do irrevocably damage brands of creators or businesses? No. In fact, when you compare the two, it seems quite silly. All right. And so you're nowhere near that. And therefore I would not worry about that. And I wouldn't let that story hold any weight over you at all. Okay. So now you push that aside. What are some tips for course correcting? All right. What are some tips for course correcting? So the first thing that I would say, and is step one is going back to vision setting, because a lot of creators gave you some awesome advice in the thread that this creator posted this, but I don't know if any of that advice is good for you or not, because I don't know where you want to go. And until you're clear about where you want to go, advice is just one person's opinion. All right. For example, like putting out something like advice is only as good as the clarity around what it is that you're trying to do. I could say something like, hey, everybody, give me some vacation tips. Right. And that would be a very general responses, and not many of them would be very useful. Right. Because, where are you going on vacation? Are you going to the skiing? Or are you going to the beach? Like totally different stuff. Right. Now, if I said something indifferent, if said, hey, I'm staying at X hotel in X city for X days. Anyone have any recommendations for me to getting the most out of that trip? Well, the advice that I get to something like that would probably be a lot better. Right. And so I would encourage this creator to spend a little bit of time, take a deep breath. Now that he's feeling calm, now that he's not carrying the weight of feeling like his brand is forever tarnished, he can dust that off. Just take a little time and vision. Like, where do you want to be 5 years from now? If you were on a panel, let's imagine comic book conventions come back with a vengeance, and you're on a panel and being asked about how awesome the last 5 years were for you creatively. Like, what would you want to be talking about 5 years from now? What projects, what teams, what impact on the world? Like, where do you want to be? Get focused on that for a bit, so that the advice that you get to get there, to make all those things a reality, can be a lot more targeted. All right. And so once you have like a 5-year vision or just, big things that you want to achieve going forward, then you want to go ahead and break that down into milestones. All right. What are the benchmarks or the key big things that you want to achieve in the next 5 years? They might be projects. They might be, financial milestones. They might be sales milestones. They might be setting up certain things or working with certain people or whatever. But what are those milestones? Like, just get them all plotted out. And then you want to break that first milestone, whatever the first one is, down into something really, really small and get that win. If you think about like a football game, right? And a team that gets down, 2-3 touchdowns, but it's early in the game. All right. What is the team that's behind focused on to get back in the game? They don't start throwing Hail Marys. Right? They don't start throwing Hail Marys. They're focused because they know there's still a lot of time on the clock. They know they're not out of it yet. What they focus on is that next first down. Just get a first down. Just move the chains. Just get a first down, right? I'm saying this probably impacted because this Sunday, we have Super Bowl Sunday. We have literally probably 2 of the best quarterbacks in the history of the NFL that are at playing from behind. Tom Brady, record-setting Super Bowl comeback, best comeback in NFL playoff history, a few Super Bowls, much to the chagrin of Atlanta, and Patrick Mahomes, who has never been out of a game, no matter how far he's down. Right? These are 2 of the best, but they don't do it just by gunning for the end zone. They move that chains. They get a first down. They get some wins in a row. And so At this point, after having a couple of what feel like big setbacks, I want you to focus on targeting and getting laser focused on just what's that next small win and build from there. All right. We can talk in a sec about what that might look like. I want to just, before we get into the sort of next couple of tips that I have for you, though, is I want to also share this other big tip, and this trips up a lot of creators. This creator had something that was working pretty darn well in his comics career. He was launching on Kickstarters. As I said, he had a $12,000 plus Kickstarter launch in 2016. He had a $10,000 plus one before that. And then for 3 years, he stopped launching on Kickstarter. For 3 years, he was focused on the direct market and focused on, I think, other things, and just stopped launching on Kickstarter. This is a thing that happens to a lot of creators. They get Kickstarter to work for them, and then they start focusing on other pastures and find that, oh, you know what? I'm stopping doing the Kickstarter thing because I'm worried about like penetrating these other markets. Like, that's fine. That's good. But don't walk away completely from the thing that you figured out, the thing that was getting you momentum. I had a creator that was sort of on this. He was like, all right, yeah, you know what? Kickstarter's working for me. What's my next big thing? Should I start establishing a presence on Indiegogo? Should I focus on, digital sales? Should I focus on all these other things? And my question to him is, well, have you absolutely maximized what you can do on Kickstarter yet? And he said, no. And it's like, okay, in any other context, hey, I'm doing this thing, it's working. What should I do next? A lot of times the answer is more of the thing that's working, only better. And this creator actually just wrapped up his best Kickstarter campaign ever after really double and tripling down on the Kickstarter platform. So this creator stopped what was working, looked to other greener pastures. I would suggest, hey, come back to the thing that was working and build from there and keep that going. Don't leave the platform for 3 years. Backers, like Kickstarter, like anywhere else, is something that you get into a habit, you get into a familiarity. Like, you get looking forward to the next launch. And if the next launch never comes, or if it comes 3 years later, and if it comes 3 years later in a completely different genre for a completely different kind of product than the last one, well, it shouldn't be surprising that it's harder to get people back in supporting you over there. All right. And so that's something that I want to just point out. Don't stop what's working. All right. Stopping what, and we as creators do this a lot because we're so creative. Like, as soon as we get to a point where something is working and it's stable and it's kind of like we kind of know what to expect with it, we have a internal tendency to want to go for that next thing and put our focus on elsewhere and establish a ground completely in somewhere completely new, and let the thing that was working and an important part of our business just kind of, well, we'll put that on the side. We can always come back to that later. The problem is, that's what the creator wants. What the business wants is consistency. The business wants funding coming in on a regular basis. And so this is the internal struggle that we have to have when we go from hobbyist to creative business owner, is that what the creator wants and what the business absolutely needs sometimes are not in alignment. And so we need to make sure that the business is getting what it needs, as well as the creator. And sometimes it can be hard. It can be hard to wear those two hats. But if Kickstarter's working for you, don't get rid of Kickstarter. Keep it going, and work on those other things on the side. All right. But so that's just an important point I want to make. The last thing that I wanted a piece of advice that I want to encourage this creator is, even though you've been at this game for a long time, I want to encourage you to get passionate and get excited about being coachable again. Okay? Get coachable again. His last successful Kickstarter launch was in 2016. Guess what? Kickstarter is in a different place now than it was in 2016. pages and campaigns are better than it was during your first Kickstarter launch. The number of projects are more. The ability of creators to launch world-class campaigns is up now. The competition is up now. And I want to encourage this creator to raise your freaking game on the Kickstarter platform. Someone called him out in sort of some of his messaging and said like, hey, you know, I got a message from you during your last Kickstarter campaign that was, I suck at marketing. That was your headline for your marketing message to me during the marketing of your last Kickstarter campaign. Is that a message that's going to help you? That's going to make anyone want to support your project? What that is, all that is about you. And it's an excuse. It's not a selling point for your project or your book. All right. It's time to get coachable again, get focused again on bringing the passion, the excitement, the world-class approach to your Kickstarter pages and campaigns, and make them a lot better. Because, you know, I went and looked at your last 2 failed launches, and those campaigns could be a lot better. Like there's a you know, 100 things you could improve about those launches. Now, that's not to say the books themselves don't look great, but I do not think you put forward the best light on those possible projects, from little things such as the copywriting and you know, how you're interweaving, you know, selling the project with also selling yourself and interweaving some of your personal story into it and why it's important and things you chose to highlight as in the project versus things that, you know, doesn't necessarily make me as a backer want to back it, to bigger things like not having any finished pages or sequential art, lettered pages that were finished on your Kickstarter page so that people knew exactly what would be that they were getting. All right. To also right setting and right sizing your Kickstarter goals. You know, I can understand why you set your goals at a mark around what your last couple of launches did. However, you were launching in completely new genres for completely new books that potentially are appealing to a different audience than you had already built up there. And so to set your the size of your launches, the difficulty level setting for where your Kickstarter was launching at a high mark in a completely different project in a completely different genre, that was playing the game on hard mode. And so there's a lot of things here, you know, and getting coachable is tough for those of us that have been at it for a while. But I can tell you, you know, in 2020, I invested in myself in coaching. Most I spent since probably college in getting help, building my business. But one of the best decisions that I made going into that was I said, you know what, this person that I've hired to help me has built something that's 10 times what I've built. So I'm going to forget about everything that I've learned and that I know, or I'm going to put it to the side, and I'm just going to do exactly what this person tells me, and take that as far as I can and see what the results are, and give them the benefit of the doubt. And so the fact that you've, you know, put it out there to try to get some support on your launch and hey, tell me what I should be doing differently. But I really want to encourage you, be coachable. All right. If the people that you're asking have the results that you're not getting, follow what they tell you to do and do it to the letter. All right. So those are some things, getting coachable again. All right. And so what would be the next steps for this creator? Well, again, it will go back to vision, but I want you to decide what that next launch would be. Now, if you are committed and really want to see this project, the last project that you launched, which was for a graphic novel collection of a book that you've been working on for a long time, if you still want that to be to launch and to fund and to be in the world and to exist, what I would do if I were you right now is I would launch issue 1 of that series. And I know, yes, I know issue 1 is already done. You've already sold 100 copies of that at New York Comic Con in 2015. I don't care. Launch that again. Get momentum going for that again. And then come back in 2 months and launch issue 2, and come back in 2 months and launch issue 3. Lower your goals, get that first win. And by this time next year, ideally, you'll have the funding that you need to finish the book. And then you launch that trade collection for the book. And you've now have Kickstarter backers that are familiar with you because you've been launching over and over again, and you've been building that momentum up again, and people want to finish the story, right? That's what I would do. I would serialize that book that you did if you decide that that's the book that you definitely want to have. Now, you may also decide, you know what, I'm done with that, and maybe I want to go back to the genre that it put on the map. Maybe I want to go back to superhero stuff, or maybe I want to do whatever. But I would decide on whatever the next launch is, and then make that a smaller project with a smaller goal so that you can get a win under your belt and get that momentum back again. All right. I would also focus, once you've decided what that next launch is going to be, focus for the next 2 or 3 months on building that audience, sending an email every single week where you're mentioning something about the project that's coming next, building interest for that launch, reconnecting with creators, putting out content around that project so that it just doesn't pop up out of nowhere, so that your past backers and your future backers and the people that already know and all the peers that you've connected with and that want to see you succeed, so that we all know about it. Because I think for most of us, the last launch came out of nowhere. And then you're going to launch it. All right. That would be the next thing. But launch it knowing that here in 2021, it's not about doing one Kickstarter launch and then going away for 3 years. In fact, I would try to get 2 or 3 launches in 2021. Even though you've had one already that didn't work, I would try to launch 2 or 3 more times, smaller projects, build that momentum, because that's where the market is right now. That's what creators are seeing a lot of success. And I really would want to see you get some of that success as well. All right. And so just checking in, I've seen some comments from people watching live. One said, "I'm living proof that Kickstarter doesn't ruin that a failed Kickstarter doesn't ruin your chances for future Kickstarters." Absolutely. Chuck Pino says, "I feel like canceling a Kickstarter damages you more because it means you lose out on that backer list. In a lot of ways, it looks like you've given up. At least failure is temporary, and you have a list of backers to start with for the next one." Yeah, it is. But I will say that even if you cancel a Kickstarter campaign, the damage is actually very, very minimal. You know, we've had some creators that when Kickstarter changed their UI, they missed it and got click happy and launched their campaigns before they meant to. You know, like instead of like previewing their campaigns, they actually launched it by mistake. Oops. And then had to cancel it immediately. Those creators, when they actually did launch it a couple weeks later, there was no negative impact to canceling those campaigns. So like even canceled campaigns, even if you have to cancel a campaign, like that, it happens to some of the best creators out there. So don't let that get you down. And yeah, I would just say that is the advice that I have. If you have additional advice, or if you've had setbacks, and found that they didn't set you back, or they didn't irreparably damage your brand, feel free to share those comments in our private Facebook group. If you go to comicslaunch.com/group, you can get that there. But otherwise, I hope this is helpful for anyone that is worried about having failures impact what's possible for them in the future, but also anyone that's got a story in their head right now that is driving them to take actions or thoughts or feelings that are counterproductive to moving their projects and their career forward, and counterproductive to getting what they actually want out of this world. You got to change that story before you'll change your reality. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Can't wait to see what you all launch next.